Julie, great to have you on the show. You have written about how a person's life experience can affect how they handle money. And I've
Absolutely.
never seen it before. I'm sure other people talk about it, but you seem to really have brought out where can we start with that? Because this is not like a 1 minute comment or a 10-second soundbite. This is something to dive deep in from a variety of angles, but I need to be quiet so you can talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I realized that before we're 7 years old, we have all these experiences, and every human has them. And when we start to realize that it's those experiences that have hardwired, and that is now 97% of how you respond to the world around you comes from those experiences. And it's on autopilot. You're like, nobody really wants to be in a bunch of debt. Nobody really wants to have spending hangovers. No one really doesn't want to be fiscally prudent because it creates struggle and challenges for us. And I don't care if you make $40,000 a year or $1 million a year, it's the same human patterning. It's just more or less zeros. And so when I started to realize that it didn't matter what your net worth was or what your income was, and we all had the same human patterning, I know as a financial planner to dig down into what was the household you grew up in about money and how was the community you grew up in and what are those stories that are hardwired into your DNA that actually cause you to emotionally respond to your financial situation. And then we get married and we have partners and we add that into the mix and now you've got two sets, and
Yeah.
then your children grow up and then now you've got other hardwiring because they didn't all grow up at the same period of time when you were in your learning curve. So it goes deep.
So you've got some hardwiring before you're seven, is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
then what happens with the hardwiring, or however you want to say it, the role models, the experiences that you have after that? Is it kind of locked in, by the time you're 7 years old, or
Yeah,
can it
it is
actually
locked in.
like it is really you can't learn new habits to overcome bad habits?
You can
Or
learn new habits. Well, that's the whole process of the patterning that I walk people through is you create a financial plan that is based on going, here's who you are, here's how you're wired. Now, this is how we hijack that natural response system and build a financial plan that's built on a sustainable platform, as opposed to one that continues to create leaky containers where money of yours is going out the door because you've not created a solid foundation for yourself. And if anyone wants to read Dr. Bruce Lipton, he wrote a book called The Biology of Belief. And this is where my research comes from in terms of how our actual physical biology is wired that way from those experiences.
and then you've basically taken this and proven it with your clients.
Yes. Yes. My second
So
book, Awaken Your Wealth, was the process that I walk clients through to actually circumvent that hard wiring so that you can then create the financial life that you desire.
wow. So can you give me a before and after story? I'm dying for one of those.
Sure.
So I'm going to ask you for several stories, but you go ahead and start with whatever one you want, and then I'm going to
Sure.
maybe ask for specifics because I love stories,
Yep.
before and after, even if the after failed, and
Right.
then why
Yeah,
it
for
fails.
sure.
Because you probably had
Right.
some of those where you went in, you did your deal, but they didn't do their side of the equation. So
Sure. Well, we're all human. I always talk about, well, you fell off the horse. Okay, get back on and start riding again, right? Because typically, if someone has a pattern of credit card debt, as an example, what happens is they'll come to me, they'll be like, okay, I'm done with this credit cycle. I make really good money, but I can't seem to get out of my 40 to $45,000 of credit card debt, and I can't seem to stop this spending hangover. Because what's happening is we're creating this debt and we're creating this credit card balance issue because we're trying to create happiness in our life by spending. But the thing is that happiness never comes from something outside of ourselves. You have to find happiness from within. And the only way you find happiness from within is to actually be who you were meant to be in this world. And so many people are negotiating that away for a good paycheck because they're not doing something that they're passionate about. They're not doing something that they love. And so then what happens is you start spending more and you got to go on bigger vacations because you need a break from the life you're creating from yourself because you don't actually really like the life that you're living most hours of the day. And so, or the marriages that you're in, or pick it, right? So I'll give you an example. So I have this one client. When I first met them, they lived way out in the suburbs in the Chicagoland area. And I said, okay, well, you work all these hours, you leave before your daughters get up in the morning and they're in bed by the time you get home. My job is to question that. So I would question going, do you want to live your girl's life like this? Like, is that what you want? Because if that's what you want, that's okay. You might be more than happy working and doing all that. And the answer was absolutely not, but couldn't afford a house closer to the city at the time. At least this is the story because grew up with a single mom, was on food stamps some of the times. So it's like, no, I can't do that. I got to be fiscally prudent. I'm not going to turn out like my mom. I'm not going to turn out like my divorced parent. I'm not going to do it. Well, so we found a way of how to only be 10 miles from the office as opposed to 25 miles from the office. We bought the dream home that they always wanted, figured out a way how to do it. So then every night was reading his girls stories to bed, like, because they were still little. And like that increased his quality of life. But the bigger dream was actually they really wanted to live on the land and in a ranch. So I kept pressing him, like, okay, what is this? But then I was starting to realize that he was absolutely miserable at his job because on 24/7.
Oh,
And this is a college graduate, but when the boss called, the boss called. And I
yeah.
go, so what's your number? And he's like, what do you mean, what's my number? I go, well, you clearly are not loving the place that you're working at. You love the work that you do, but not the people you work for because they expect you to be accessible 24/7. And that doesn't match the quality of life that you told me that you want with your children, right?
Yeah.
Because you're in the middle of reading that story and the boss calls, you're answering the boss and you're letting your daughter wait, right? This
Yeah.
is not what he wanted. But yet, success and career was all about it, right?
Yeah.
Turns around and then his number was first was 7 million. Okay, once I have 7 million, then I'm out. And I'm like, okay. And then went down to six, then it went down to five. And then before he got to five, he was actually let go from his job because when you know you're not in alignment with something, if you don't make the shift in your life, life tends to make the shift for you. And I can give many examples of people that delayed that change in their career and then the career changed it for them. And because they were let go, downsizing, whatever. So I said, okay, now it's time to go for that big dream that you wanted. Was getting all these big offers for out of town, but the dream was the ranch, right? So wanted to go
Yeah.
out west.
Yeah.
Didn't
Yeah.
want to be here. Took a job that was a third of the income than he could have gotten on the East Coast and got the ranch, got the dream.
Where's
Then
the ranch?
COVID happened outside of Denver, Colorado,
Okay. Okay.
and didn't want to, but COVID then happened,
Yeah.
and these firms out east that were willing to pay triple the price now would let people work remote for that triple income. So got the ranch first, then got the big job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it didn't seem like it aligned at first, but what he did is he chose himself. That was the big piece here. He aligned life with what his heart really desired, and then trying to formulate a plan based on this kid grew up on food stamps, lots of financial scarcity in his childhood.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do I not respond from a scarce standpoint, even though I'm making a healthy six-figure income?
Yeah.
And that was building the plan all around that. And we have to remember, we're not going to get it tomorrow. It's a process. Like allow yourself to be on the bridge. But the key is continue to dream the bigger dream. And it's all about aligning with your heart and your soul. Because if you don't, and this is where it comes to my work with Deepak Chopra through the years, is that disease then develops in your body when you don't align with self because there's a disconnect, there's a dis-ease in how you're plugging into the world. And it's about aligning those things. And to me, that's the only way that you win in life and have a sustainable win.
I'm 67, so farther,
Mhm.
much farther down the road, probably easily double what you've got in your life here. But you look very young,
Well, thank
but
you.
very
I'm
wise.
51.
Oh, okay. Nice job. My
Not so
wife's
far behind
51.
you.
Yeah, my wife's 51. So there you go. She looks awesome
Perfect.
too. Um,
Aw.
this is very interesting. So with this person, so what was the time frame that it took him to kind of make each step in the journey that was kind of changing? So I like to talk about how a lot of what we do, our tasks, our goals, are moving from point A to point B.
Correct.
So based on his fears,
Hmm.
growing up in scarcity, he had the wrong point B.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
it's not wrong. It's the point B that he could see at that point in his life because it's a
beautiful,
belief
beautiful.
system and a story that you align with in your mind.
Yeah,
And the story's just not big enough for who your soul is, right? And it's just about going, oh, wow, he's already circumvented and gotten way bigger than any of the kids on his block growing up. Like,
yeah,
so
yeah,
there's all those stories that continue to lock into your brain, right? And go, so one of the things I wrote down right as you were talking is going, oh, this is where I talk about building your financial muscles. And your financial muscles are really having these little wins along the way because when people first meet me, they're kind of like going, oh, well, that's real nice, Jewel, but my MBA teaches me this or my education teaches me that. And I go, I understand. I'm highly educated from really top universities in the country, including my MBA from the University of Notre Dame. I get it. But I got to get you out of your head and I have to get you into your body because your body doesn't, your cells, literally your cells in your body don't believe that it can be a different path because you haven't had the experience yet of that different path. So we have to build those muscles of belief of like, you can follow your heart and what you're passionate about and be paid extremely well for it.
it's very
And it can be
interesting. Oh,
sustainable.
so it's very interesting. One of my conclusions in life is that nobody sells us better than ourselves.
Right.
So whether we have the negativity committee screaming at us full of fear that,
Hmm.
we have to do this or this is going to go terrible or whatever, or whether we're selling ourselves on something that's based on partial truths or assumptions that's not true,
Hmm.
or we're selling ourselves on reality.
Right.
Nobody sells ourselves better than ourselves because we cycle, and
Right.
that's what I hear you saying. And I do like the what did you call it? Financial muscles, money muscles.
Financial, you got to build your muscles.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, it's great. But it's such a great example because you have to build it a little muscle at a time. And you
You're
don't
not
just
going to
go to
go
the
in.
gym once and
Exactly.
I'm Arnold, I can
Yeah,
go do
I'm
it.
gonna
Yeah.
do 450 pounds. Yeah, no,
Yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah.
not. No, you're
Yeah,
not.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you gotta go, okay, you gotta believe, like going, I really can do this. And then when you have that little win, it's like, that made me feel so good. I want to do that again. And I want it bigger. Like, that's what
Yeah,
starts to happen with people. And then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
yeah. Yeah. And so let me give you a different example and see whether you've worked with someone like this. Let's say you have someone who I'll give you two different sides of the spectrum in their life. Okay. So this person, the parents struggle to make money.
Hmm.
Okay. So and let's say we go traditional. Let's say mom doesn't work, dad's
Hmm.
trying to work, but
Hmm.
he's trying to be someone he's not,
Right.
and he's not successful. He's trying to be a salesman, he's not a salesman. Okay. However, they have a one of their parents is actually both of their parents are wealthy, but one of them's actively involved and kind of
Hmm.
helps them out
Hmm.
regularly.
Yep.
Okay. And
Hmm.
so there's always somebody to bail them out.
Hmm.
But the kid doesn't know that.
They haven't built their own financial muscles.
He doesn't find out. The kid doesn't find out until the kid's, in their 20s or 30s or whatever it might be. Okay.
Hmm.
So have you ever had somebody like that? And what were they like and what happened?
Oh, for sure. So a few things that I wrote down is that so when you're doing a job that you don't like, you're not so our nervous systems are connected up to our pineal gland, and our pineal gland is in the middle of our brain. Our pineal gland is the light at the top of our lighthouse that attracts and manifests what we bring to us in our lives. So, for an example, and this is where, and I'm going to go down a rabbit hole here real quick. Emotions are energy in motion. So, if you don't like your job and you're frustrated and you're angry and I wrote about this in my first book where I was talking about going, wow, I see all these people getting off the train in downtown Chicago in the morning and everybody looks ticked off. Nobody looks happy. No one's like, yeah, I'm going to work. Nobody. And I'm like going,
Like a casino.
it's a prison sentence, right? It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I never wanted to be that person that was doing that about going to my job. And so when you're having these low vibrating emotions, and Dr. Joe Dispenza has a book that's called How to Breaking Breaking Your Belief System in Your Mind and Creating a Whole New World. That's not the exact title, but it's something Dr. Joe Dispenza. But he talks about the frequency and vibration of emotions. And they now know the megahertz of, so that's why if you're operating in joy and gratitude and happiness, your pineal gland and your nervous system is open and attractive, and you're going to be rocking and rolling, right? But if you're
yeah,
frustrated, angry, and you're competitive, and it's like, angry, well, those are lower vibrating emotions. So what you've done then is you've contracted your nervous system, which means you can't actually attract the promotion, the salary raise, the bonuses. You can't do that if you're in frustration and anger. But you can when you're in gratitude and happy. So, and a great example of this was in 2008 and 2009 when everybody was taking pay decreases because of what happened in the markets.
yeah, yeah,
I had clients that were getting $50,000 bonuses because those were the people. This is where I realized no matter what the economic conditions are, those lower vibrating emotions actually bonuses. These people were in their passion, they were doing things that they loved. Cash flow was coming in, they didn't lose their jobs, they didn't take a salary pay decrease, and they got $50,000 bonuses when the
yeah,
entire world was financial struggling. And that's when I realized going, oh my God, this is a really big thing that when you're in your passion and joyful about the work that you do in the world where you get a paycheck, you're going to attract more money to yourself. And it's because of your nervous system, whether it's hijacked and contracting or whether it's open and expansive. And it's because of what your pineal gland is doing and how your lighthouse, if you will, is shining. So this particular example that you gave, when you have a job that you don't like, but you're doing it for a paycheck, again, this is a story I wrote in my first book, The Emotion Behind Money, where 50% of my male clients between 55 and 65 years old developed cancer in their hip area. It was colon cancer, prostate cancer. And I started going, why has so many of my male clients in this age range done this? So Deepak Chopra would say that a cancer cell develops because that cell has lost its sense of purpose. And I was like, how did these guys lose their sense of purpose? I got a little woo-woo for my financial brain, but okay. Every single one of these men lost their job not by their choice. They didn't willingly leave their job. They were downsized or something happened in their family and they had to move or something happened that wasn't their choice.
yeah,
And then their system went because men put on that provider hat super serious for their families. They will do anything to provide for their families. I have a lot of people when I first meet them, they're doing a job that maybe fed their heart and soul at one time, but now it's just a paycheck to get the family to get them to the next place. And so what's happening as a result of that is they're getting mixed results with bonuses, pay raises, promotions, because they're not in alignment with that job anymore from a passion perspective, from their hearts and their souls,
yeah,
right? So then you add the layer in there of wealthy parents of helping them out. I see this a lot today where I'm like going, like parents today who have younger children, I'm like going, take the credit cards away from the kids. Take them away because
yeah,
your children need to learn to build their own financial muscles because otherwise you're enabling them. It's kind of like, well, a toddler needs to roll around on the floor, then get up and start crawling, then can get up to like Frankenstein walk, and then eventually we'll run, right? your money is the same thing that you have to figure out how to, maybe you have to get a nosebleed and not be bailed out so that you understand how to handle your money in a little bit different of a fashion. Because that doesn't ever stop. Like, then you repeat that pattern with your own children.
Yeah.
That's why with most entrepreneurs, 87% of the time, by the time the money from the original entrepreneur and the business and it hits the fourth generation, the wealth and the business are completely gone 87% of the time by the fourth generation. And it's because
Wow.
they didn't have the same financial muscles that the original entrepreneur had to not only become income affluent by building a business, but also learn how to hold money in abundance so that you are asset affluent, so that you can build assets to be wealthy.
So are you saying that the 87% that doesn't last, of course, you're talking 4 generations out, that's pretty far out, but are you saying that that is because they're not teaching their kids to develop their money muscles?
Right. They're not
Yeah.
understanding what the value of a dollar is. They're not understanding like what happens when you don't have it and how do you say no? They just think that it just keeps coming in and it just like, but they haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Why is it that across history, thousands of years of history, you look at the
Hmm.
Israelites,
Hmm.
okay? I mean, you look at even King David. I mean, as a
Hmm.
father, the guy failed big time. Now, I'm
Mm.
not perfect. I've made a lot of
Yeah.
mistakes as a father, but
Most humbling
and
experience of
I've
being a
been,
parent.
yeah, exactly. But you look at it, and so why aren't we learning? Why aren't we learning as parents or as a society? You look at today in America, we don't teach
To the national
civics.
deficit.
Yeah, we don't teach civics. So, how our government is structured, how we have certain responsibilities, we don't even teach those. We don't teach how to manage money, or if we do it in it's more like it's a snack
Right.
versus okay, we're going to start teaching you from third grade every year how to manage money. Years ago, a long time ago, like 30 years ago, plus maybe, I was on a curriculum committee in the city of
Mm.
Novato, California.
Mm. Hmm.
And um, there was a sex and health ed or something curriculum coming up. So parents were invited. You could be part of this committee to
Hmm.
talk about the objectives, blah, blah, blah. So there were like 30 of us in the room.
Hmm.
It turned out, guess how many parents were there out of 30?
Oh gosh.
What do you think?
5.
One,
1.
me. That's it. And I'll never forget that there was a guy who was a PE instructor at Novato High, and there were 2 high schools in the district. And he said something profound. And this applies with civics and so many soft skills you could teach, leadership, time management, teamwork, whatever, but
Hmm.
particularly financial management,
Right.
is that he said, you're asking us to teach them health,
Mm.
and we get them for 6 weeks or something like that. I don't even think it was 6 months
Right.
because that,
Right.
yeah, it was, and then we're supposed to teach them health. Health should be weaved into their math.
Yeah.
You do this, this happened. It should be weaved into science. It should be weaved into their English. And think of the power that we could do. Think what would happen with our nation. As a matter of fact, I saw a headline building off what you just said, because when we're recording this, just for the audience, the election results are coming out today. Yesterday was voting day. And I saw a headline yesterday. It said, none of these candidates talked about the deficit spending. Yeah. And
Yeah.
think what would happen with our nation. We could
Right.
actually be a nation that endured if we taught money muscles to use
Yes.
if we taught this.
Well,
Yeah. So
so
am I
let
right or am I wrong? I
you're
mean,
100% correct. And if I could say that, so this is another lesson that I learned in '08 and '09 when the market tanked. We handle our governmental finances, our corporate finances, our employer finances the same way we handle our personal finances. And I realized this because I had a few senior management clients who worked for General Motors, and they were fiscally always chasing everything. Like they would create these debts and we'd have to, refix things because they were overspending. just like General Motors was bailed out by the government, declared bankruptcy in '08
Yeah.
and '09. It's like you are financially aligned the same way as the companies you work for. So if you work at a place where everyone's talking about their debt and not getting raises, blah, blah, well, that's going to become your reality because you are the company you keep. So go to some employer that not only feeds your heart and soul, but also that's fiscally prudent. I said this to one of my clients who's a business owner. She's an architecture firm. And I said to her, I go, you know what? She actually hired me to personally sit with all of her employees. She's a small business. And I said, sure. She goes, because I keep hearing you say that I'm only as strong as a business owner as all how the fiscally prudent my employees are. And I could tell she had her dream set on this person taking over her business and she was grooming them and blah, blah, blah. And over the years, I'm like, I certainly couldn't divulge to her their personal finances, but I just kept coaching her, going, well, maybe you shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. Maybe, look at multiple options. And she was like, no, 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 no. This guy could not stop creating credit card debt. And he was constantly digging himself out of a hole. I'm like, this person can't buy your business from you when you want to retire. And I couldn't fiscally say that, but I just would always suggest like making sure you have a few options. And sure as heck, like she was getting ready, she was then pushing the conversation in her early 50s, going, okay, let's start this 10-year thing. And he kept like going, And she goes, Julie, why is he doing that? I'm like, because he's not fiscally set enough to do it. And
Yeah.
she goes, what? I go, you need to have that conversation with him. And the minute she did, it was 18 months later, he left and took a job somewhere else.
Yeah.
And she now has people, and she's in an arrangement with people who are fiscally prudent because she's worked really hard to create employee relationships with people who are fiscally prudent because she's fiscally prudent. And
Yeah.
so we are the company we keep from our friends. Like if you and your friends talk about all this debt that you guys are in, going, find some new friends because you are them, right? And I'm not saying they're not nice people. I'm just saying that, or maybe you're the leader in your friend group to do it differently. So going back to teaching, see, there's a part of our system that wants to have these debt instruments so that we can control the masses of people. And debt allows a system to actually keep control of you. Now, my financial counterparts would say, well, but interest rates being low, then it's actually prudent for me to only pay 2.5% of my mortgage and I can make more money out here. I go, yes, blah, 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 blah. But here's what I know. The day that a person pays off their house, their car, their student loans, their credit cards, you never see somebody happier than that day because a burden has been lifted from them.
Yeah.
So we have to choose to stop creating financial burdens for ourselves, let alone align with our passion and our purpose. Like I was invited up to Capitol Hill for retirement week a few years in a row. And what it was is anyone who worked for the government up on Capitol Hill could come. There were like 50 of us financial planners from around the country and could come get free advice from us. It was just kind of like, it was a way I donated my time. And what I realized when I was there was that this one congressman from the South asked the question, how do we get Americans to start, saving more money for retirement? And I was like, I'm watching my colleagues answer this question, all typical, well, depending on the Roth, you can do a Roth IRA, blah, blah, blah. And they were saying all the technical financial stuff. And I sat there and I was the last one to speak. And I said, you're asking the wrong question. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, how in the heck, if Americans are spending so much of their income paying off their past choices with all their debt payments, they can barely live in the present moment and operate their household cash flows, let alone plan for something for retirement. So you got to fix the debt problem in this country before you can get more retirement money. Because most people, that's why the average savings for like someone who's 50 years old is only like $44,000. It's ridiculous. But so until we decide as an individual and as a community and as a culture that we actually want to be financially empowered and stop giving your financial empowerment away to banks and credit cards and student loans, and you choose to step in your power, because it is not fun. You cannot pivot as easily to working something that feeds your heart and your soul if you have all these financial commitments for all these past choices that you've made.
Yeah,
It's harder to do.
it's wow. So
And then
it's
it's this conundrum that you're stuck in. And so how do we break that suffering cycle? That's the key. So really small example of this is everyone's probably going to buy another car. That's a fair assessment, right? You're probably going to
yeah,
buy another car.
yeah,
So when you're done paying that $500 a month car payment, I want you to shift your financial patterning because this goes back to the patterning from your childhood. Well, this is how everybody does it. This is what in our community. Da, 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 da. Don't stop making the payment once the payment's done. But what I'm asking you to do is interrupt your financial suffering cycle and switch from going financial defense and paying a bank that money every month and pay yourself that money every month. And people go, what? And these are smart, college educated people that I deal with on a regular basis. Like, what? I go, I want you to open up a savings account. And these online ones today, you can actually name your account, which I love because it's your financial intentions.
yeah,
Call it your new car fund. And I want you to put that 500 bucks a month, just like it drafted out of your checking account. I want you to have it automatically sent to that new car fund. So you're switching from financial defense to financial offense and you're becoming more financially empowered. That is what building your financial muscles are about going, oh, I could do this. And this is a great story with one of my clients. She calls me up. She goes, Jewel, and hers was only like a $250. She had a really small car payment when she
yeah,
first got
yeah,
out of law school. But when that was done, she listened to me and she said, okay, well, I'm going to put this 250 a month now into this car fund. Well, when her car went, she had about $9,000 in the account. That's not a real great car that you're getting for 9,000. I go, well, you could do one of two things. Take that 9,000 and then take that 250 a month, and that can be your new payment, right? She actually decided, she goes, you know what? My Toyota Camry had 300,000 miles on it. So I went and got one that was $9,000 that had 100,000 miles on it. I got a car. She goes,
yeah,
but I kept putting the 250 a month in there because she didn't want the debt so much
yeah.
that that's what she chose to do. Or the next payment, maybe it's not 500 bucks a month, maybe your next one's 300 a month. Well, keep putting the 200 in there while you're paying the bank the 300. Like
Yeah,
change
but
the system.
you can get a great used car, just as your client
You
did. You can
can.
get a great used car for 9 grand. And I read an article, or had a part of an article in the last week that said 1/3 of car owners or car owners with loans, I'm not sure which, owe more on their car than the
They're
car is
worth.
worth. Okay.
It's
And
crazy.
you talk about who we hang out with. I just saw also it was a call out, I think from the Bible, but it said, bad morals corrupt good character. And you think about just role models. And that's what you're
Right.
talking about when you're talking about these life wounds, life
Yeah.
experiences affecting how we handle money. And the old proverb,
Hmm.
the rich rule over the poor, the borrower is servant to the lender.
Right.
Uh, it's so that, but then I look at I live in California, on the left coast, and we have bond issues, okay, and I always vote, but every bond issue I just say no, 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 because we had a
Bonds are
huge
debt.
like we had a huge deficit this year. Newsom doesn't acknowledge any of this stuff. He's got his own issues, but um, people just like, oh yeah, we got to do this. It's good for schools, or it's good for their position. Like, hey, we don't have the money, and
Right.
we don't have the money to pay the pensions that have been promised. Anyway,
Oh, don't even get me
yeah,
started with the pensions. I'm from Chicago, and I
yeah,
just sold
okay,
my property in Chicago because the mayor just came out and said, we're going to raise real estate taxes for people so that we have to raise 300 million to fix the pension funds. No, no, no. What you
no,
need to do to fix the pension funds is actually stop stealing money from the pension funds and using it in other places and let the pension fund sit as the pension fund itself. The problem is everybody stuck their sticky little fingers in a pot that wasn't a pot of money to take from. And this is where all the fiscal dysfunction comes, even in our households today. It's like you have
yeah,
this money set up in your new car fund, but you're tapping into it because you want to satisfy some emotion that's going on inside your body by spending it somewhere else. And this is where the crux of the problem is. So the mayor of Chicago is doing exactly what he wants somebody else to fix the problem. It's not a revenue generation problem. This is where don't get me I'm
Go for it.
you can't just keep doing and pressing yourself in your life to generate revenue to fix the problems. You have to actually look at the expense side of things and just say no and sit in your reality and feel the emotions of the reality that we've created as a society and choose to stop doing that because you're actually feeling what has been created as opposed to bullshitting yourself that's not reality by trying to generate more revenue
Well,
to fix it.
but that's what a lot of these pension funds are. So like in
Right.
California, every year that you work, you are guaranteed 3% of your highest income for up to 30 years. So you can get up to 90% of your pay
Yeah.
when you're done, plus full benefits for the rest of your life. And it's not there. It's
So let's
vaporware.
let's
The
let's
money
go
doesn't
deeper.
exist.
So people have stayed in those jobs because of the pension plans, not because they loved the job.
Yep.
And that actually is what's creating disease in their bodies. So there's a couple layers of dysfunction, in my opinion, on that stuff because the people gave up parts of their lives because of this pension and this juice that they're going to get. And now they're going, well, I better get this. Okay, I understand that on some level because you've given up parts of your life. But in the same token, you're promising things that just pension funds don't make those rate of returns and the monies aren't there. So why do people outside of the pension funds, whoever, what needs to happen is my financial opinion is that wherever that money went for those pension funds, it needs to go back from those places, not from the places of people generating revenue to fix it.
Well,
Right? It's no different than the
in
wealthy parent. It's no different than the wealthy parent enabling their child and bailing them out all the time. The taxpayers are bailing out the bad decision makers of the pension fund. Like
yeah,
that
in
it's the same process.
I totally agree with you. In our area, it's a little bit different. Um, most of the pension funds have gone into the pensions wherever they are, but there's not enough, nowhere near enough. And so it's this untold debt that's not calculated anywhere. And for
Yeah.
me, and I'm curious on your opinion, I have felt for many years that the solution is very simple. You don't have that type of pension in private practice. So
No,
what you
because
do
it's
is you want to pay a
unrealistic.
pension. You can pay a pension of up to 10% of their annual earnings, which would be very, very generous.
Mm,
But you pay it every year. There's no
yeah,
debt. You just pay it.
right,
And
right.
so they don't have to stay in a job that they hate because at any time they can walk with their pension because it's
Hmm.
been paid. And,
Right.
it's not, it just keeps it simple. But then you've got all these ridiculous pensions. I mean, you have
Right.
fire captains who are retired, they're making $300,000 a year not to work, plus full benefits. And it's not funded.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just
a whole other
so
different layer going on. We have a
crazy.
layer of, I've had people walk into my office and they have their city job in the morning and their state job in the afternoon, and both of them have pensions and they're supposed to be in the field in the opposite hours. So they're two
Yeah.
$80,000 salaries, two pensions, and it's systemically a huge problem. And
Yeah.
so I believe that all this stuff is the light is being shined on the dark, and this
Yeah.
fiscal dysfunction is actually coming to a helm. And because the state of Illinois has people leaving in droves because they're done with fiscal dysfunction. And
Yeah.
Illinois, after '08 and '09, when I'm at meetings and I'm looking at the financial charts, it was New Jersey, California, and Illinois were the three worst states that took way longer than everybody else to fiscally recover from.
Yeah. Yeah.
Illinois is the only one that's still in the red from '08 and '09. The SEC actually sued the state of Illinois to get their pensions in order. And that
Wow.
still is in its process of working its way out. So it's
Wow.
fascinating to me. But if we look at it systemically, this is a debt problem. It's a debt problem because pensions are also like they're payments. You're selling today for these payments that are promised, whether it's credit card payments or it's pension payments. And one thing I also want to add, systems and stuff like this, I also believe would get fixed Most people in America do not realize that our Social Security system would not be what it is today if Congress actually had access to Social Security. They have their own pension fund. They don't even get Social Security.
Oh yeah. No, I agree. I
So,
agree.
so there's
No.
again, the underlying message here is debt is a disease in this country. And debt, whether it's pension debt, credit card debt, student loan debt, that's what causes you to not be able to live a life that is in alignment with yourself because you're always chasing, you're always on the treadmill, you're always trying to generate revenue to fix it. And
So, so
that's
let me
what
go
fear.
back. Let me go back. And I can talk about the government stuff all day long, but I think the audience is doesn't want me to go down too far on that rabbit trail. But
Absolutely.
so I want to go back to something you said earlier about fear driving us
Mm.
and the way that we spend money, and it can drive us. So you talked about the unhealthy fears,
Mhm.
and you've talked a lot about that. I'd like you to talk now about what could be a healthy fear. I mean, like I know people who manage their money well, and in part it's a discipline, but in part it's also what I would call a healthy fear, where it's like I know I need to do this, so I'll be okay. I'll
Right.
be secure. Whatever.
Sure.
Let's can we shift gears a little bit there
Yeah, for
about
sure.
what
Yeah.
that looks like and maybe how to
Yeah.
nurture that, which maybe is your pact, PACT for the audience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have the one end of the pendulum is people who overspend in the debt conversation we've been having. Well, then you
Yeah, yeah.
also have those who have been fiscally prudent, but those are the ones who actually aren't living, right? Because they're the other fears of like, I'm afraid that I'm going to lose my job. I'm afraid. So they're hoarding their money and they're squirreling it away. I'm like, I client where I'm like going, all right, where have you put all your little nuts? Because every time I talk to them, going, which little cubby hole did you put all the nuts in? And she's like, you're the only one that knows about all my little corners where I stick it all. And that's a healthy fear. So she's got anxiety around the bottom falling out because in her childhood, the bottom did always fall out. Dad was an entrepreneur and it was feast or famine all the time. So she was hell bent that she was never going to live like that as an adult. So she got all these little backup plans. And so, in light of that, so when I'm running somebody's financial plan, I'm sitting here going, okay, so some of the assumptions you can make is like, well, on your retirement plan, assume higher rates of inflation and lower rates of return, right? That's a way that you can, that ultra conservative part of you that has this fear and anxiety about it going, then that can position you to be lucky, right? But then it's also about oftentimes when someone has healthy fears, I literally ask, I'm like, how much is in the stash of cash in your house? How'd you know I had that stash? I go, well, you're kind of telling me that you've got anxiety around money. You're always worried about bottom falling out, and this was your childhood. And so I know to ask the question, where's the bag of cash? And the highest one I've ever found was 300,000.
Whoa.
That someone had 300,000 in a suitcase. But if you understand their background, they came from communist, their parents lived through, and they were a child
Yeah.
in Eastern Europe,
Yeah.
where if you didn't have cash in a suitcase and you relied on the system, you were out of luck
Yeah. System
and you had
crashes.
nothing.
So,
Right.
but let me
So this, go ahead.
no. But you're talking about two unhealthy fears. That's still an unhealthy fear. Wouldn't you agree?
It depends what you allocate it towards. Is it a fiscal fear? No, fiscally, it's put them in a really great spot. Fiscally, they've got the backup to the cash. They've positioned themselves to be lucky that no matter what life throws at them, fiscally they're fine. So
Yeah.
that's a healthy financial fear, right? Because you've positioned yourself to be lucky where you have all this money in these different pots, in different banks and in cash. And, so fiscally that's
But
not,
you indicated, if not said outright, that the person may still not be pursuing who they truly
that's where
are.
it's
So
unhealthy. Right.
yeah, so that's where I'm catching. So I'm curious, have you ever had a client um, who actually had the balance right. Okay, where they said, "Look, I know I'm pretty good at this, but I want to talk with you. I want to come in for a
Right.
tune-up. I want to come
Hmm.
in for how do I make my strength even stronger?"
Right. So we talked about both ends of the pendulum, right? The hoarder
Yeah,
and the spender, if you will.
yeah, yeah.
And so everybody works with me to get to that place in the middle.
Right.
Right. So everyone gets to that place and everyone has. So one of the things that I do in my firm is we actually have questionnaires that measure your right and your left brain because all this, all the fear and all the conversation that you're talking about is going, let me see where your smart left brain, logical brain evaluates money. And then let me also see where your emotional brain, your right brain actually. And oftentimes it's different. It's that same two ends of the spectrum, right? So what I understand to do is that not only in an individual, but even in a couple, like you've got four sides of a brain when you got a couple going on. And so it's aligning those two sides of self and building the financial plan around that. So for an example, if somebody's their emotional brain has high anxiety and fear, but uh they've stored a lot of cash in places, it's about making that cash as efficient as possible. That's where you're coming more to the middle and saying, you know what, you've got your savings, you've got your CDs, you've got, now let's start to like actually build more into bond portfolios. So you're making a little bit more interest, but yet still being conservative depending on the kind of bonds that you buy. Right. So it's like you have that financial pyramid and you're just building that base more solid, but also making better rates of return on your money and that takes time. Like so typically, again, building the financial muscles. When people are really ultra conservative and a hoarder, when I'm first starting to introduce them to, let's just say it's short-term bonds, I might just have you start at like $100 a month because that's all you can handle because you've squirreled it all away in four different banks to get FDIC insured,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah,
And I'll say, let's put a little bit in a real estate fund, something that's real estate because people who typically like cash typically like dividends. They like
yeah,
dividend paying stocks or real estate. So,
yeah.
and those are just patterns that I notice with people over time. And so that's me building their muscles of trust in vehicles that I know those financial firms do right by people because God knows there's enough financial firms out there that are all about the profitability, not about the people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you got to be mindful of that as well. And so that's building their trust muscle. And you know, it's a big tell sign with people when I ask, okay, your expenses are 5 grand a month, 10 grand a month, whatever your number is. How many, the typical recommendation is 3 to 6 months in a savings account for emergency reserves. Well, if somebody's ultra conservative and they've squirreled away all their money, um, they're not wanting only 6 months. That conversation is 12 to 24 months. And is one, I want to honor that that's how they feel. Even though it's not fiscally efficient, I have to honor the other side of their brain. And
Yeah.
what always happens as they build that financial muscle is they kind of go, at some juncture, everyone always has a breaking point going, Joel, do you think I should take a little bit more and make more interest on it somewhere else? Like everyone always hits that breaking point because they've started to build the trust because it's trusting something outside of what is their emotional reaction to things. And this is how, and everybody hits it at a different point, but it's about my job is to honor where their emotions are at and build it around going, okay, I'd like you to get to this place, but you're
Yeah.
going to get there in your timing, not Julie timing. And that's why there's so many problems with financial professionals because financial professionals can be pushy and they're aggressive A-type personalities
Yeah.
and they don't honor where the client's at. They're going, well, you're doing it wrong. There's so much shame and guilt and blame around money and how people do it that because we think if we're not honoring our own body intelligence, which is our emotional side, right? If your body is tensing up because the market's going down, you're going, oh my God, well, then your financial plan is not built on you. It's
Yeah.
built on what somebody else told you was fiscally efficient. And you're not honoring your nervous system in that process. And that creates then a ripple effect in a negative direction, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So, how about for the audience sake, you walk us through your PACT process, the PACT.
Hmm.
Um, because I think that'll be very valuable for them. And I think,
Absolutely.
um, it really strikes me of how powerful you could be to come into a company at any time of year, but particularly to come in, you know, November, December, January, as people are starting a new year with like, hey, I want to help you learn how to manage your finances better. But of course, that's going to spill over into how you work together as a team for
Yep.
this company.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the PACT process, it starts with picturing the life that you want to create. That's the P. And this is straight out of my book, Awaken Your Wealth. And why do I start with picturing the life you want to create? Because if you looked at your current reality, which is the second step of the process, the second step is accepting the reality that you've created. If I just had you look at reality, like the pension funds, for an example, like we were talking about like before, but if you're looking at that reality, it's like, ugh, why bother? Like it doesn't get you excited necessarily. It doesn't get you motivated. Or if you're looking at debts that you have to pay off, you may not be excited about that. So you have to have a compelling reason for change. And that compelling reason for change is what your heart desires at that moment in time, at whatever age you are. Because life is about taking the next adventure and jumping into it, whatever that is. And so people will always ask me, they're like, well, what do you mean? Financially? What do I want? And I go, I don't care if it's financial, whatever. So the question that I always ask people is, picture the life you want to create. And when I ask that question, they never, ever, ever talk about the money. What they do is they tell me what they want in their family life, what they want for their kids, what they want for their spouse, what they want in their careers, what they want personally, go on vacations more or pay attention more to their health. They want to do an Ironman, whatever it is. And so I always circle back and then I go, so how about financially? Like, when do you want to retire? And what do you want to do with kids' college? What do you want to do? And so it gets to the money stuff because the money is what actually fuels all those others' desires because it's it's not really money is what makes the world go round and money gives you choices. But if you don't have a system, so it's about that you're setting these intentions and of all these desires that you have, then my job is through this pact process is now we know we've pictured the life that you want to create from this point forward. The second step is that we have to accept the reality that you've created. So, opening up those envelopes, looking at what your cash flows really look like. Please keep in mind that I did not say what your budget looks like because nobody likes the word budget emotionally. Because a budget makes you feel like you don't have choices. I want you to choose your cash outflows from a place of empowerment, not from a place of you're bad and you can't do that. Right. So a
Yeah.
budget makes people feel like, oh, I can't live the life that I want to live. And the whole purpose of this is to live exactly the life that you want to live. So I want you to go through and make conscious choices of your cash outflow so that you're choosing to align where your cash outflows are to where you're planting the seeds for what it is that you want to create in your life. So that acceptance of the reality that you have opens up emotional space. And then also in the second step of the process, the A is about awakening your authenticity. It's about who you are. Let's get back to that. So I'll walk people through like, when you were a kid, what'd you dream of? Like people can always imagine like, oh, I had all these dreams and all these goals. And I'm like going, what happened to that? Well, life, blah, 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 blah. And I go, well, is
Yeah.
that still important to you? So I kick the tires on, really starting to, and people will get this grin on their face. And that's when I know I've got it. And I'm like, tell me more about that. And then they just start spewing about what they love a lot. So that tells me that's an alignment with their heart. And we've got to get those desires and that in alignment while dealing with this reality, right? So then the C step of the process
So
is
so let me
actually,
stop you there. Let me stop you there. So it sounds like you're very good at helping people find that one thing. So there was a book by Gary Keller, The One Thing.
mhm,
And Jim Collins referred to it as a BHAG in doing a
yeah,
20-mile march.
yep,
So can you talk a little bit about the person who's like, oh yeah, I really want to do this, but then I also want to do that, they have multiple, which is
mhm.
impossible. It is my struggle to be candid. So, but you've got multiple and how you help them get to Sounds like dating. The one. But but the one thing, to use Gary
Well,
Keller's thing, or
well,
the BHAG.
define the one, right? So as you were talking, I was thinking of this other client who's out there in California, and she spent her whole time in hair design. She now does makeup on movie scenes and stuff. And I said to her, she goes, well, I got to get that job, like that one thing. And I go, why? She is super creative
Yeah.
and she doesn't work good in one thing. Like she's got ADD and ADHD and she's like, she's all over the map, like an entrepreneur. And I
Yeah.
said, do you love the jobs that you do? And she goes, yeah. So she does stand-up comedy. She does makeup on movie sets. She teaches at a hair design school for makeup and hair, because that's what her whole career has been. And if she ever needs some extra cash flow, she decides to drive Uber. And I go, why are you judging all of that?
Yeah.
Are you happy? She goes, well, but I'm supposed to have this like 9 to 5. I said, says who?
Oh, I agree.
Who
I agree. Yeah.
says you have to do it in this package that's acceptable to society? So, what I've always said for years is people come to me for permission to live exactly the life that they want to live.
Yeah.
And she just needed somebody to say, who cares if you do it that way? She's doing amazing out there. And because her heart and soul is being fed with these multiple different things, she's soaring in all of them across the board. Getting on movie sets that girl on the south side of Chicago is not supposed to be on those kind of movie sets, right? And
Yeah.
but she's
Yeah.
she's loving her life. She's healthy. She's vibrant, and so it's coming in a different package. So we have to watch how we judge whatever that one thing is, because you
Yeah.
probably have someone. So like my growing up is my dad couldn't understand just, and this is from his wiring, and I'm my dad's favorite. He could not understand why his daughter went to Notre Dame and none of his sons did. And I have 8 brothers. So it was because
Whoa.
his dad played football at Notre Dame and he always saw that one of his boys was going to go play ball at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And the fact that
Rudy.
his daughter was the one that went to Notre Dame, like in his head, he can't even like, well, that's good, Jewel. But what's wrong with your brothers that they didn't echo? Because they're not that. I'm that, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not, we have to watch those stories that actually just come from our limiting beliefs of the way we grew up. It's the way we think. And we have to start to untangle some of that stuff that's in our DNA. Like, and it's about increasing awareness. Going, just because this is the way that it's always been done doesn't mean that it has to be done that way in the future.
So this reminds me of my dad, who was a wonderful man, but he was trying to be a real estate salesman or own his own real estate brokerage
Hmm.
because his father-in-law was successful in real estate
Right.
and as a salesman, etc. And his dad was an Uber salesman, a
Right.
narcissist, but an Uber salesman. And so he was trying to do that. He spent most of his life doing that, and never made a good living. Never
Mm.
felt good about himself. Had
No.
migraines.
So most of
Yeah,
us have 3 buttons. So when we're on the emotional processing, we either feel like we're not enough. So when you told that story about your dad, he didn't feel like he was enough when he compared himself to
yeah,
something outside of himself, right? So trying to be
yeah,
the real
yeah,
estate broker. We
yeah.
don't feel worthy or we don't feel loved. And usually this is where our patterning is from our trauma or rejection before age 7 that's locked into our amygdala because we don't feel loved, we don't feel worthy, and we don't feel enough. And so when I see people chasing something outside of themselves, I'm like, well, why do you do that? And they're like, well, and if they can't give me a good reason, I just keep kicking the tires with them, going, well, what about for your reasons as opposed to something outside of yourself, like because you're not measuring up? I'm like, who do you got to measure up to? That's just a storyline, right?
Yeah.
And I know this because I was always trying to my wiring. So let's just go personal here. My wiring was I could never be enough for my dad because I didn't have a penis. I had a vagina because I wasn't the boy who went to Notre Dame. And it was like, that's crazy when you think about it. It's crazy. But that was my driver to build my business, to get the degree, to get everything. And when I realized going, well, do I really want this? What do I want? And then it was like, oh, that changed the whole game. because then I hired people to do everything else. And when I aligned more with myself as opposed to the driver of feeling not enough
Yeah.
because I wasn't a boy, and all of a sudden going, oh, it's doing for my own reason. My company's like 10 times the value now because of that. Because when I woke up saying, I'm not doing this to prove it to anyone, I want to do it. And that's when I opened up to going, oh, like I really understand the emotional side of money. Like I'm going to let my freak flag fly and be this unique piece where people in my industry be like, well, that's great, Julie. You're kind of a one-hit wonder. Good luck. And then I was like, then I found myself even going and trying to build a business to prove to the men in my industry, because it's mostly men,
Yeah.
that I'm not a one-hit wonder. I can teach other financial planners to do this. Then I'm going, I don't need to prove anything to anyone. So this subconscious wiring that each one of us has, you've got to be mindful of it because it keeps coming up to play havoc with you. And you want to make sure that that's not your motivator for what it is that you do in your life. Because I would sit there and I would just tap my heart. Well, what do you want? What do you want? And I consistently to this day keep feeling into myself going, what is it that I desire to do today? You know, and it's about making impact. But I had to let what I call letting my freak flag fly in the business of finance to be who I am and not be that mahogany desk financial firm that most Notre Dame graduates look like, right? Like not the polished and like I'm a female, I'm not wearing khaki pants and a polo, right? Like that's every man who went to Notre Dame wears khaki pants and a polo, right? And
Yeah.
not good or bad, it just is, right? And I know I went to Notre Dame because it feeds my heart and soul. Like I love what they stand for, which is why a lot of people hate Notre Dame, but the excellence across the board,
Yeah.
like no matter what it is, whether it's sports or academics, and they do it, they don't where I align is that it's they really push the human heart, that should really be the driver in so many things.
Yeah.
So that's when I understood that that's why I went there and why I fit it, as opposed to the motivation of I can do this to prove this to my dad, right?
Yeah.
So each and every one of us has that when you stop living life based on that trauma where you feel like you're not enough, you don't feel loved, or you don't feel worthy, and you start to go, oh, I'm going to do this on a basis of this is what makes me tick. This is what excites me. This is what brings me joy. Just like my client out in California, it brings her joy to do all four of those different things. When she went out to California after her mom died, she did not think she was going to be a stand-up comedian. But what happened is she was going on movie sets and she would be talking to people and somebody said, we're going, you're really funny. You should really be a stand-up comic. And she's like, what? And that she just is that person. She's got those one-liners that just make you laugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she decided to share it on a stage and now she fills a room, right? And she's having a blast doing it and getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
So
No.
you just
Yeah.
don't know, but it's just aligning with you, aligning with yourself, and not having anything else be your driver. And we don't do that in life because we're stuck financially. We're stuck in a lifestyle that we've created for ourselves. And that's most shift.
So let me go down a rabbit trail for a second. I know we're only through the P and the A of the PACT, P-A-C-T, but we have a teenage generation today that is addicted to social media. And a lot of the messages that keep them there are the three that you just mentioned.
Mhm.
Okay. That they're not good enough, they're not loved, and what was the other one?
They don't feel worthy.
They don't feel worthy. Okay. And they got them. So
Mhm. Because
have you
they're
done
hitting their
any work?
dopamine button in their brain.
Yeah. Yeah. And so have you done any work with teens to help
Well,
them learn at an early age of, hey, what if you really took a look at your life experience and how that's affecting how you process truth, how you process data?
yeah,
Um,
I have four teens in my own home. And so yes, and it's interesting because I will challenge them going, they're like, well, and I'm divorced, so it's interesting because they'll say, well, this is what mom says, this is what dad says, and then they're not really sure who to trust on either side because when it comes from different places and it's not a unified front, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always defaulted to going, well, what does your heart want to do? And they're like, what? I go, what does your heart want to do? And I have one kid who totally can surrender into what his heart wants, does it. And it's interesting. Some people then say, well, you're selfish. It's like, well, but he's doing what his heart desires, right? But so often we think that that's selfish in our society. And then I have another one who followed her heart. And then she's like, well, and I would coach her going, are you sure that's what you want? Because here's some of the other things that you want to consider. And so she has to learn life a little bit more from experience and getting a couple nosebleeds, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because she's so on her own path. Um, I think teenagers, if they are willing and open to actually considering that, but I know that I've set up a system in my company to where, hey, you're our client, but your kids' financial muscles get built way before they're in their 20s out of college. So if you'd like for us to work with, like I have younger millennials that are in my office that I'm like, hey, they can start to work with some of those people in my office just to start to say, well, what does your heart want? What do you desire? And so, like, I'm coaching the parents, but then also having a chassis so that the kids can be coached by other people in my office to follow and align with your heart.
So I'm curious,
And
and I'm not telling you how to parent. So, but I like the follow your heart, but even adults, I mean, following the heart versus can equate to following emotion or fear versus following your heart based on facts, which it sounded like you were trying to coach one of your kids. It's like, okay, you want to follow your heart,
right.
but what about this fact? What about that fact? And how do you have a breakthrough on that where the kid can actually, I mean, when you were a teenager, I don't know about you, but when I was a teen, I knew everything. Okay. I mean, I did. I
Yeah.
knew everything. I
Yes,
was
I
right.
understand.
I was, if not the best, I thought I had it all together, even though I knew I
Right.
didn't. That was something I didn't really pay attention to because I knew everything. But then I
Yeah,
grew older and I forgot all that I knew. And so, when you have adults even have trouble comprehending the wounds of their past, which I believe we all have,
sure.
and in varying degrees. And then trying to think what is reality and what does my heart really want versus what are the facts and how much of these facts do I need to pay attention to versus blow them
Well,
off because my heart, quote unquote,
well,
or my
so I
emotions are
talk
driving me in another way.
so I talk about this in my third book, The Four Spiritual Laws of Money, where there's the mental intelligence, which is what our
Okay.
conversation is, but then there's also the body intelligence. So oftentimes, so we ignore the signs that our body gives us, adults and children. We ignore those signs. And our body, if your nervous system contracts, then it's not in alignment with self. It's not in alignment with your heart. If your body gets anxiety, if you're frustrated, or if you're pausing, like we then bring it up to our brains. We evaluate it out with these highly educated brains of ours, and then we try to make a good conscious choice from our brains. The thing is that you might be overriding your body. So, like my one daughter, I will tell her, I'm like, well, you kind of got anxiety and you're kind of like lashing out at me right now. So I don't really think that that is fully in alignment with you because you wouldn't be having this ramp up emotional projection at me if it was in alignment with you.
Yeah.
And she'll walk away like, you don't know what you're talking about, mom, blah, blah, blah. He has that day. She'll come back and she'll be like, sorry, mom, I see what you're saying. And sometimes she has to go out and experience it, and then someone else out in the world shares like, yeah, and then she gets it.
Yeah.
Right. So people are going to learn different ways, but I do think it's important for listeners to hear that watch how you're making decisions. Like, is it just from that smart brain of yours? Or are you actually listening to your body? Because a lot of times, if you're listening, if you're just trying to evaluate, like I've done everything, I'm highly educated. So we're trained to bring it up to the brain, evaluate it, and make the best choice. Right. But that is based on external information, not internal information. The subtitle of my first book, The Emotion Behind Money, is called building wealth from the inside out. And this is where you work on that body intelligence. And that's another part of the process to trust that when those emotions are coming up, that just means something's not in alignment with self. And you have to not only honor the information outside of yourself. So one of my teachers always said, start with your heart and then add your smarts. So your heart's saying one thing, okay, then what is the logical steps maybe to get there? Right?
Or what are the facts that support the journey in the way that I have defined it
Right.
versus maybe I need to go 1 degree left
Correct.
type of thing. So very interesting.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm not sorry for the rabbit trail because I feel we could talk for even longer there. So, but please let me give you an opportunity to finish. You've got the picturing yourself and accepting your reality,
Right. And
awakening
those,
your authority. So,
the reason we take so much time on those two steps up front, because that's the solid foundation.
yeah,
Those are the most important pieces. And those are the pieces that every financial planner doesn't do. But it's the foundation. So many financial planners don't do that
so
because it's like
if we thought of four cornerstones to your holding up your foundation. So you what would they be? You've got accepting your reality, awakening your authority,
awakening your authenticity.
authenticity. I'm
Your,
sorry.
you could call
Yeah.
it your inner authority, right?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So we've got those two
And it's
cornerstones.
well, it's picturing the life that you want to create, right? So,
Okay.
so all of this, actually, when you said this, if you were to look at yourself as a being as a four-legged stool, this entire system, you're a fourfold body. It's your mental self, your emotional, your spiritual, and your physical. And so this entire process is creating a foundation so that you're balanced mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. And it's
Yeah. And
giving you a solid foundation.
yeah, let's come back to that four-legged stool or the four cornerstones at the end because I kind of
Okay.
see now as I'm thinking that we're going to be very much in alignment on the four because they're actually the four that you got lined up in the P.A.C.T.
Mm-hmm. And so
Yeah.
the C step of the process is actually choosing to change. It's like going, okay, I'm choosing to look at things that I haven't looked at before. I'm choosing to approach my finances in a way that I haven't approached before because I'm going to change that suffering cycle that I've been in. So it's really just saying, okay, I am choosing and I'm going to take the courage to take this next step. And then the T is taking the action. And that is where most people just start the process going, hey, like in my industry as an example, hey, we have these financial products. You need this X, Y, and Z. You're trying to make a great return to get it. Let's just take action. But this is why
Yeah.
we have compliance problems in my industry because the fact that you're not aligning the products in the marketplace with the actual human that you're talking to. And
Yeah.
we have completely as an industry taking the human out of the financial asset management process. Like it's well, what's the left brain logical and the rate of return and efficiency, diversified portfolios in my 401k and blah, 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 blah. Like, no, well, it depends what you're trying to create in your life because you are a creator. Every human being is a creator of their own life. You've created what you have up to this point and you'll continue to create. So when people start to, like if somebody's let go of their job, not by their choice, I always tell them, congratulations. And they're like, I don't really think that this is good. And I go, no, you've just been given the gift of a blank canvas and you can design it any way that you want. It's just like moving and going to a new school when you're a kid, right?
So
Like you could be
so
whatever kind of human you want to be.
I know you have limited time. So I want to see whether you could allow me a little flexibility. And so if I think of four cornerstones, I like four cornerstones. I like threes
Mhm.
and sevens too. But so if we started with one cornerstone is picturing yourself, and that's kind of where you want to be, right? Where your heart wants to be. Is that yeah, right?
Why would you want anything different? The
Yeah.
problem is we've all negotiated ourselves away and it doesn't happen overnight. We all have good intentions of aligning things with our heart right at the beginning. And it's just that over time, it's like going, oh, but if I stay till March in this job, I get a big bonus. And then they give you something else. And then they give
Yeah.
you something else. It's called golden handcuffs. It's an intentional process that employers do to hook you to stay there.
Yeah.
The
Thumb up.
question is, are you going to play the game or not?
So
Right?
we got one cornerstone, picture yourself. We got the next one of accepting reality and awakening your authenticity. So
Hmm.
that's a change movement.
Yes.
Um, and then and that may involve that involves facts, right? You've got
Hmm.
facts in there because you've got to validate. Okay.
Yep.
And then choosing to change, you're basically deciding on the direction, right?
You're
Okay.
choosing to step onto a new reality.
Yeah. And then the fourth cornerstone of take action, I would also, and it may be there. I'm going to get your book, by the way. So I've got to read your book. So I did
Thank
not
you.
read it. I read summaries and notes. I didn't, there was so much I could see immediately. I thought this podcast could be easy. So but the take action also, and maybe it's in the book, involves accountability, self
Oh, for
accountability,
sure.
yeah, or
I
peer
do.
accountability.
Mhm.
You talk about that. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
I do. That's why I've started actually doing group coaching as well, because
yeah,
it's not only the accountability on the financial front, it's also, personally and career-wise, what are you doing? Because when you're operating not enough, and that's the basis of how you're plugging into the world, that doesn't only show up at work, it shows up in your relationships, it shows up in your friendships, it shows up in your family life. So it's like I realized that these patterns move. And I'll give an example. I had a client who's far behind in retirement planning, Julie. I don't really care how far behind I am. Let's just do the most efficient with it, what I can. Okay, no problem. So she came in, she had like $40,000 of credit card debt. I think it was 36,000 at the time. And she said, I need to get this done. She made a six-figure income. And I said, okay. So we came up with her financial plan. And then the next year she came in, I was like, this is interesting. Her credit card debt was down about 5 grand and she gained like 30 pounds. I was like, what's going on here? And I was like, how you doing? It's like, I know, like I've gained all this weight, but her credit card debt went down, but her weight went up. And this is where our health and our wealth are so intertwined.
yeah, yeah.
And then I said, do you have any regrets in life? And she's like, that ship has sailed. She was 47. And I was like, what ship has sailed? I didn't even know there was a ship. Like, what ship are you talking about? She goes, well, I always wanted to have kids. I'm like, you can have a kid. She's like, Jewel, I'm 47. I go, so what? I'm like, maybe your pipes don't work anymore, but you could adopt. You could be a foster parent. You could get a surrogate. And she goes, well, I never really thought I'd do this on my own. I go, because what she did is her dad was a narcissist. She married a narcissist who was also an alcoholic, got divorced, then never found the new one. And then I go, and then I started to realize going, oh, her boss is her dad and her ex-husband. So same bird, different name, different face, same patterning.
Yeah.
And I said, and you know what? You manage $2 billion for a non-for-profit. I don't think making $110,000 a year is comparable. So I gave her an assignment to go look at what people who manage $2 billion. She's like, they make like 280 grand. I go, you're not enough button is playing havoc with you. And so the next year she came in, credit card debt was back up. She ran an Ironman, weight was back down. I go, all right, we really got to address this thing of you always wanted to be a mom. Like, how do you want to do that? How do you want to get that in your life? I don't care if you wind up getting a pet instead, like something to nurture, something to take care of, right? That was something that was driving her.
Yeah.
Came in the next year and she had started fostering kids. At 50 years old, she started fostering kids and she now she adopted two of them, like her fourth or fifth set, brother
Yeah.
and a sister. And they're like teenagers now. And she's in her 60s. And the minute she addressed that piece in her life, then she told her boss to go pound sand. She's now making the $250,000 that she should be making. And then she found the relationship that she always desired.
Okay.
Like it all aligned. But it was about understanding that when we're not addressing what we love, like it was playing havoc, whether it was with her money, with credit card debt, and then it was her health with gaining weight. Like, where is that piece? And it was moving. And so when you really address what the core issues are, then you're building yourself on a strong, not only for your money, but most importantly, your family, your career, and everything else.
So, so Julie, congratulations. This has been the longest podcast I've recorded to date. And I feel like I could keep going for a few more hours. So you have
Mm,
been incredible. I think this has been great. There's a
thank
tremendous
you.
amount here, and I hope we stay in contact. So, but because there's a lot here for individuals, companies,
Yeah.
and as we discussed, our nation. So, if you had a closing thought for anyone or wanted to refer them to your website or anything else, I mean, what would you say? We started with kind of an invitation to an interesting discussion. How would you like to end this? Or you could leave it up to me, but then, you never know what you'll get. So I
Sure.
think you should have the opportunity.
Yeah, well, by all means, you can find me at juliemurphy.com, and I have everything from books, workbooks, online classes where you get me for 6 weeks, or online coaching. Come join the community if you want to change your life, be around people who support in doing that, whether it's, David's podcast or me, like we're here to add some more bright light to the world. And thank you for allowing me to do what I love to do and being in my passion. And because we're just way showers to show people how to actually do that. And I didn't grow up with any money, but I learned how to become income fluent and asset affluent. And you live what you learn to teach. And and if I would leave everyone with one thought, it's about love yourself enough to choose you above everything else.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to add anything because you've done a wonderful job.
Thanks, David.